Time to elevate. You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.
Hey everybody, it's Matt and Tony. We are running on empty. I'm the Matt part.
And I'm Tony.
And we are running on empty. And this week we've got an awesome show. We have an interview with a friend and colleague. His name is Robert Farmer. He lives in Ballincollig, Ireland, which is near the metropolitan city of Cork. And we got to know each other. I'm thinking it's 10 plus years. And we met in the realm of game shows. I got an email one day and just talking about sharing ideas with game shows, because I have Game Show America. And, I figured, well, he's in Ireland. He's not a threat to me. So I just sent an email back, and we ended up meeting and became best of friends. I call him my brother from another mother. But we want to have him on the show. And I think, Tony, we need to talk behind the scenes that we want to make this a regular thing, because he's going to bring a European flair to some questions we're going to have and some situations that are going on in this world. So without further ado, welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much, Matt and Tony. It's a pleasure to be on my first podcast with you. I know this is your fifth or sixth episode, but thank you very much for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And give us just a quick little status update of yourself, maybe a little bit of background, and what's going on in Ireland right now.
Well, for myself, as you rightly said on your outset, I had a game show company, and like many people who get involved in the entertainment business, you start somewhere along the line as a kid in the DJ field, and I was one of those where I was a DJ doing weddings and went into clubs and pubs and things like that. But the thing about DJing is I was never one just to be able to stand behind decks and just talking to mic. I was more of a party DJ rather than just the mixer DJs as you have in today's world. I had to get out into the front of the deck, and I had to be involved with the crowd. And by doing that, rather than doing DJ stuff, I created things, I added things, like I might start playing games with people. I might make up games as I go along. And I got more involved in the MC side of things. And being an MC then got me into game shows, because I was always a lover of game shows. And over here in Europe, we have a lot of game shows that you have in the States as well, our versions of them, whether they originated in Europe or whether they originated in America. We all had the same style of shows. For example, Family Feud you have in the States. Our version is Family Fortunes. And because of all of those shows, I got more involved in the MC side of it. And then as I got older and wiser when it came to business, I decided to open up a game show company as well. I started off by doing a game that I created myself called Battle of the Sexes. Basically, I had men versus women. It was a physical challenge type of game, 6 rounds. At the end of every round, person is eliminated, 1 man, 1 woman, and then you're left with 1 man and 1 woman at the end of it. And my challenge on that final round was I reincarnated Elvis. And I said that if Elvis decided to come back in this day and age, because of the way the world evolved, would he come back as a man or would he like to come back as a woman? Hence, there was a battle between the man and the woman doing an Elvis song, karaoke style. The woman would do her version of it and the man would do his version of it. And then I just got the audience to cheer, the clapometer, as we called it. And 9 times out of 10, both of them got a prize. But that's how I developed into the game show side of things. And then with internet getting stronger as the years went on, I started scouring the net, and I started going through different people in my field in Australia, in Europe, and of course in the States. Now I came across, I have to admit, Matt, I came across a lot of game show companies in the States, but yours, and I'm not saying it because I'm on your podcast, yours by far outshone everybody else. And I kept going back to it and back to it. And then I just said to my wife one day, I said, listen, I'm just going to chance and email him. And hence, I did email you. And you said, because I wasn't a threat. Remember, I'm Irish. Wow. We're threats all over the world. I said I'd contact you. And the rest is history from that point of view. Now, today, in 2020, with regards to pandemic, things started to slow down, and I have now shelved my company. I called it similar to yours. I called it Game Show Ireland, but I shelved it. It's not gone. It's just up in a shelf at the back of the room somewhere. And I am now, because I have a special needs son as well, I'm a full-time carer for him. And if the game shows and the businesses ever go back to the way they were, I can start bringing it out and doing it more of a part-time basis, because we've got when you're a full-time carer, you're only restricted to certain hours that you can work and certain monies that you can earn on top of that. So I balance both. Hence, here we are today, and this is what I'm doing now.
Wow. Well, thank you for the history. That's, very similar to what I did, coming up through the ranks. And I'm really glad that we've gotten together and had a chance to meet a few times. Came over to Ireland, a year and a half ago, and you've been over here a number of times. And it's what I've always found fascinating is when we start talking about things with regards to what's going on in our countries, it's really awesome to have a perspective that's not somebody that's American to say, here's how the rest of the world looks at you. And I think I'm going to throw it over to Tony here for some contents or some questions, because I know we really want to know what does the rest of the world think about the United States and what's going on over here right now.
Yeah, Robert, what we want to know is, we know you can't speak for all Europeans, but from a European perspective, how batshit crazy does the United States look right now? Let's do a couple of issues, like the pandemic, right?
Yes.
U.S. has got the leading number of deaths. I mean, we have not flattened the curve. The masking became this crazy political issue. The experts like Dr. Fauci end up getting death threats. I mean, how does this look from a European perspective?
In a nutshell, it looks crazy. Yes, I understand every country in the world have people with diverse opinions. But what seems to be coming across to us from the United States is that your diverse opinions are really extreme and really out there. You're either black or you're white. And I don't mean that because of the Black Lives Movement. I'm talking about, you're either on the ground or you're in the sky. You're black, you're white, you're man, you're woman. There's no in between. And it doesn't seem to be coming across from that point of view. Regarding Trump, I have to put my hand up on one incident with the pandemic and Trump. He did get in early. He did talk about the pandemic early. But the problem is he spoke about all the wrong things. It was all about him, and it seemed to come across that it was an ego thing from him. If he had listened to the experts from what we believe at the start, at the very beginning, and I'm talking about late December, early January, he would have got in front of an awful lot of countries by doing the right thing. He keeps saying that, we closed the borders to China. But he didn't really. I mean, if you really want to analyze it, there were people still flying into the United States from Europe who came in from China into Europe and Europe into the States. So he didn't close people from China to go into the States, but he keeps harping back on that. So from our perspective over here, we're just looking at a guy, and yes, he came from the reality world TV, from a guy that if the ratings aren't the way they seem to be for him, he will create something in order to get the ratings up again. And that's what seems to be coming across all the time.
Yeah. Has Ireland, how has Ireland done with the pandemic?
We did very well at the beginning. We closed our country down on the 13th of March, lock, stock and barrel. It was the first time ever in its history. And I must admit, it was tough for everybody. I'm talking about every single business you could think of was closed. When it came to supermarkets, a person of a household was allowed to go to the supermarket, stand in line outside, then you were allowed in to do your quick shopping. You were given a time frame to be in there, and you had to get out. You had to wear masks, you had to wear PPE gear, you had to do all of those things. And that was for about 6 weeks. Now, the government straight away started to pay. They brought out a thing called a PUP, which it was a pandemic unemployment payment is what they brought out. And at the beginning, it was €350 for everybody that was out of work based on the closure of the pandemic. But then as the weeks went on, they scaled it. They said, right, people who were in a certain job, who were getting a certain amount of money a week, you will be entitled to X amount of money. Anybody who was earning less than that, you will be entitled to X amount of money. So they scaled it down into 3 categories. So they did very well at the very beginning. But the problem with the Irish government was that there was a change of government in the middle of it. And it kind of upscuttled everything. The new, we call him Taoiseach, Prime Minister, basically, who took over and tried to take control of things that he didn't seem to understand from the previous government. And they were doing something from scratch again, and they started off from scratch. And it just got a little bit, chaotic at times. But they did flatten the curve. But what we're seeing now over the last 2 or 3 weeks, especially in the capital county, Dublin City and surrounding areas, is the spike started to go up again, or wave 2, as they call it. So they created 5 levels. Level number 1 being the country open. Level number 5 being in total lockdown. The whole country at the moment, with the exception of Dublin and its county area, is on level 2, whereas Dublin, because the rise is going up so fast, are now on level 3. So that's where we stand today. And there are a few more spikes happening around the place, different clusters developing again. So they're talking about maybe creating a level 3 for the entire country. But this was inevitable. It was going to happen. There was going to be a level 2. There was going to be a level 3. We might even go into total lockdown again. We don't know. But at least the majority of people here understand what they have to do to try to keep it down, to keep the curve down. Everybody are wearing face masks, going into stores, going into shops. It's mandatory, actually. You have to do it. The law came out that you had to do it. Nobody complained about it, with the exception of Jim Corr and a few people. Jim Corr being one of the singers of the Corrs international pop group. He's big into this, where he wants to, for some reason, stamp his authority against the authority issuing the rules. Right. But they're the minority over here. We're very lucky from that point of view. And when we look across to the United States, and we can see that, how many people do you have there? Is it 300 million or 400 million?
Yeah, about 320 million or so.
Yeah, and when you see that half of those are leaning to the Trump side and half of those are leaning to the other side, and there's no in between. And when that kind of comes across to Europe, it looks like it's a complete country in disarray.
Yeah,
that nobody seems to know what's happening or what's going to be around the next corner down there. So,
do you have all the children back in school? Are they all back in school full time?
All the schools have reopened. They've been open now, I'd say, about 5 weeks. Now, yes, we've had a few spikes in the schools, but as one of our science experts over here said, that this is inevitable. It's going to happen. Once you start reopening things again, people are going to get sick.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is they know more about it now than they did 6 months ago. So they can cater for it a little bit better. They can nip it at the bud, so to speak, So, and that's what's happening over here. So we are going to hit the wave 2, but it's going to be controlled. We are listening to the scientists, Basically, that's what's happening.
Shocker, right?
Yeah. So,
go ahead, Matt.
Next question.
With regard to masks, masks has become a political issue here. So you're either pro-mask or anti-mask. I don't enjoy wearing one, but you know what? That's the rule. Like the county that I live in, we have a sheriff that doesn't enforce anything. Unless it's ICE, then he enforces all of that. But in Ireland, it's not like wearing a mask is a political issue. It's like, we understand you have to wear this thing, and obviously there's going to be people that don't want to, and I get that. But here, it's seriously, if you were there. Okay, for those of you that can't see this right now because we're only doing this on audio, Robert just put his mask on. But yeah, I always have a mask with me wherever I go. I don't think it's a big deal. It's not a violation of my rights. The sign on the door says no shirt, no shoes, no service. Now it says no mask. So are you going to argue that you're so offended that you have to wear a shirt and shoes to come in the store too? Is that a violation of your rights? But that doesn't seem to be a big deal over there, except for those few.
Well, you see, I think a lot of people over here understand that masks don't stop the virus.
Right.
Like basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to tell everybody, and everybody in fairness are abiding by what they hear, that if you keep to the basics, you will prevent yourself possibly of getting this virus. The majority of people that are going to be affected by it, they won't end up in hospital. They won't end up very sick. It'll be like the flu or it'll be like the common cold. But it doesn't mean that that COVID-19 is less than the flu or greater than the flu. It just means that you're managing it better. And they say that if you wear a mask, at least you're giving yourself some sort of a protection, not 100%, but some sort, preventing the droplets that come from your nose and your mouth going out and other people hitting your face.
Yeah.
They say that if you wash your hands regularly, if you were normally a person who would wash their hands 5 times in a day, do it 20 times instead and just wash your hands. Simple things. If you're walking down the street, try to avoid somebody if they're coming against you and stand out on the pavement or stand out on the road and keep that 3, 4, 5 feet of a distance between them. And they keep coming out saying that if everybody just does this, the curve will come down a lot quicker. Yeah. Because you got to remember, the virus doesn't travel. It's the people who travel and move from A to B have the virus on them. So it's the people are transmitting the virus. Yeah. And if everybody understood that, I think that approach will be a lot better. I mean, if you look at Sweden, for example, Sweden never went into lockdown, never closed anything, never closed shops, stores, schools, the whole lot. And they've got the lowest mortality rate in the world, and they have less people affected by the virus than a lot of other countries.
Yeah, but they've had a lot of death in Sweden.
At the beginning, not so much now. Not so much now. I mean, am I right in saying over in the last week or 2 weeks, you surpassed 200,000 deaths?
Yep, we did.
Yep.
You know, and that's the worst in the world, you know.
Well, Sweden, isn't it true? Sweden overtly went for the so-called herd immunity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Boris Johnson originally wanted to try that over in England, and it was a failure, wasn't it?
I think you're touching on Donald Trump's half-brother there. Yeah.
No, it was a disaster in London for a while, was it not?
Yes, it still is.
That's right.
Boris Johnson, again, I mean, England are just, 50-minute flight from where we are here. But they did not get it right at all. You know, they never closed pubs properly. I mean, Boris Johnson only came on the TV about 2 or 3 nights ago on their TV, English TV. And he started saying that they're now going into a 6-month level of closure, not the whole complete lockdown, but they're restricting pubs. They're restricting the amount of people that can go into restaurants and pubs. They're now separating tables. I mean, this is 6 months down the line of when this pandemic really hit. And now they're only doing it, and I think the reason Boris Johnson is doing it now is because of pressure. The pressure of Prime Minister in England because of the political system over there is an awful lot different to your political system, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute, because I'm dumbfounded how your political system still goes the way it goes. It's
Robert, you mentioned pubs. One of the stereotypes of the Irish over here is that you guys like to partake of the drink every now and then.
No, really?
So, did they close the pubs and bars in Ireland? Yeah. And was that done in a relatively calm way?
It was done in a very calm way. Everybody understood it for about maybe 6 to 7 weeks. Now, we have to admit that after that period of time, with the pubs closed, you had people out of work. Yes, they were getting a supplement from the government, but publicans were not getting that. They still had to pay their rates and their rent on businesses that they didn't own the buildings to. They were still trying to keep a family business going in a lot of cases. I mean, we've had pubs that have not reopened since they were allowed to reopen a couple of weeks ago, only a week and a half ago, actually. But the majority of punters that would go to the bar accepted it. But you got to realize as well, Tony, that over here, you could go in and buy 20 bottles of a beer for €15 in the supermarkets. So with the pubs closed, suddenly there was a lot of house activity going on. So a lot more crates of beer were coming into the house. So the drinking culture was still there. Although, dare I say it, since I've been visiting Matt in the States, I now believe that I had it all wrong. I always thought that the Irish were known for the drinking, but I believe Wisconsin are pretty well known for drinking as well.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Wisconsin founded Ireland. I'm just saying that's a
Yeah.
I'd believe it when I saw a couple of you drinking over there. I thought I was the calm one compared to a few of you, but that's it. But if I can throw a question back to the two of you, if you don't mind going to the political side.
Sure.
One thing that I can't understand is, from a European, when you're looking across the water back in 2016 for the general election, and for a guy to lose on the popular vote but still become president, I just can't understand that. Why is that?
Well, the so-called founding fathers of the United States did not trust the popular vote to choose the president. And I think to understand that, you have to understand something about the slave culture of 1787. In order to get the national constitution, compromises had to be made so that the southern states could feel they could maintain that culture. Their fear was that the northern states that were non-slaveholding would end up with a greater population, more votes, and that in a popular vote, they would elect someone who would be on a crusade to end slavery. And so they created a system that would empower the states, essentially, to choose the president through these things called electors. And, it worked. The first 5 presidents of the United States were all slaveholders. And that was not done by accident. The system was set up that way. And so this electoral college is kind of like an 18th century relic that has remained in this current space. And people who support the electoral college say, oh, well, it empowers the small states. It actually does not empower small states. It empowers what are known as swing states.
Yep.
Right. So right now, this entire election in 2020, it's being conducted almost entirely in about 5 or 6 states.
Yep.
Right. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, I would say Ohio, Florida.
Florida, definitely.
Maybe 1 or 2 others. And by the way, half of those are not small states at all.
I think they're considering Texas a swing state this year.
Oh, okay, maybe. Now, I personally don't think that the national popular vote would work unless we had another rule that the winner had to get at least 50% of the vote or more. Because if you had a popular vote system where someone could win with 30% of the vote because there's, say, 8 candidates, we'll always have Trumps, right? Because you'll always have some rich, eccentric guy that'll be able to spend millions of dollars to get 25, 30% of the vote.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there, but we've had a headline over here in the last 2 days that, and I'm going to paraphrase it now because I can't remember the exact wording of the headline, but it was along the lines of that if Trump loses on November 3rd, that 1, he's going to blame the fact that the voting was rigged, and 2, he's going to refuse to leave power and he's going to put it through the Supreme Court, who at that stage, he's going to have another judge, I believe. He's trying to get somebody else in to fill in the judge that passed away last week. So that will mean that it will be a pure Republican Supreme Court judiciary. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, In fact, there's a wonderful article just came out yesterday in the Atlantic magazine by a writer named Bart Gellman. I don't know if it's available for free on the internet, but he lays out this case. And essentially, if Biden wins by a landslide, then there would not be that big of a problem. But the scenario the Trump people have in mind is that it's a relatively close popular vote. And he has spent the last 4 or 5 months doing nothing but undermining the mail-in vote system. And so he and his cronies will create this false constitutional crisis. They'll throw it into the Supreme Court, where he will have 5 and possibly 6 votes to hand him the presidency. So that is the nightmare scenario. And something, Robert, it's becoming more and more realistic each day.
Well, again, if to put in my European tuppenny's worth on this, from what a lot of us see over here, when you look back to the 2016 election, a lot of people in Europe predicted that Trump would win. And they predicted it from the point of view of the Democrats putting up the wrong candidate to go against him. Because they felt from a European point of view that Hillary Clinton was damaged goods, already been in government and already creating, I won't say scandals as such, but she was in the news quite a lot from a negative point of view when she was in government back in the years. So us Europeans feel that she was the wrong candidate that the Democrats could have put up. This time around, they're looking at Joe Biden. And all we're seeing over here are clips of Joe Biden going out making speeches and doddering a little bit, forgetting things.
Right.
In some cases, forgetting where he is. Now, I'm not sure, is he older or younger than Trump? But
he's about a year older. I think Biden is 75, Trump is 74.
But when you look at all the candidates that the Democrats put up to go forward for the election, wouldn't you have thought that, again, it's from a European's perspective, but wouldn't you have thought with the size of America, surely there was somebody out there that would have been strong enough that the people would have embraced to say, yeah, he or she is one of ours, and that was coy enough to be able to tackle somebody like Trump, who wants to be a dictator. He wants to be in Putin's pocket. He wants to be in Kim Jong-un's pocket, And wouldn't you think that, you've got all these celebrities over there. Tom Hanks is the first guy that comes to mind. He doesn't seem to put a foot wrong. Now, I know he wouldn't go into politics, but if there was somebody along those lines that would be capable of going into politics, wouldn't mind going into politics, and could have been embraced by the Democratic Party to say, listen, will you stand on our behalf? And just, we'll push you as best we can. And at least then you would know that you've got somebody strong, knows what they're talking about, is able to talk about world issues as well as domestic issues. But who do they get but Joe Biden? And now I hope he wins for your sake, but and for the world's sake at that,
Do you think, Robert, that the Trump victory in 2016, I understand what people over there think about Hillary Clinton being part of an establishment, but do you think this was also along the same lines as Brexit over in Europe, where I think a lot of people did not expect Brexit to pass, and when it did, it looked like it was more of a strike out against the political establishment rather than a real love of Brexit. Just like the vote for Trump, I'm convinced, in large part, was a strike out against the establishment. What do you think about that analogy?
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. If you want to compare it to Brexit, where both of them are exactly similar, is David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister of England at the time. It was a gamble that he put forward about leaving Brexit, to put the vote to the people. He and his party felt, oh yeah, we'll put the vote to the people. They won't want to leave. We'll go out and we'll do our canvassing. We've got all these parties that are together in this, and we will tell the people that no, Brexit means that if we stay there, it's going to be beneficial to the country and all of these things, right? When you look at Donald Trump at the time when he went out, the way he spoke at a lot of the rallies and the way he spoke at the debates, you could see he hadn't a clue what he was talking about, but he spoke the way the people he was talking to would speak. He would say things to a fellow person on stage, shut up, you don't know what you're doing, or I'll put you in prison. He was saying the things that the public want to hear. The public don't want to hear things about, the fiscal policy and what the rates of the GDP and all these slogans that politicians would normally use. Your ordinary public person wants to hear a person who's going to go into office that will speak their language. And when it came to Brexit, Nigel Farage was the guy who stepped up and created a party called UKIP, UKIP. And he started telling the people in their own language that it's best for Britain to get out of Europe because we will have our own stance again. We will be able to stop all the immigration that's coming in. We can decide who we bring into this country. And by using that stand, the majority of people in England were hearing it and were taking it on board. And they all went out and they voted to leave Europe.
Yeah, and what we're finding, so in Europe, you get the Niles Farage and the Boris Johnson. They're kind of like backbenchers. But when they finally get into governing, they're basically incompetent and they can't function. And it's like that here, right? The Trumpian politicians get a lot of people excited at the street level, but then they get in. And I mean, I don't know how anyone could look at the Trump years and see anything. I mean, the most benign way I could phrase it is that there is some incompetence in the administration. And I
well,
go ahead,
Tony. From what we see, like we agree with Trump getting in based on how he approached the public. He did everything right. It was the same with Nigel Farage to get Britain to vote to get out of Europe. But where we're stumped as Europeans looking across at America, when you look at the size of the country, as you said, 320 odd million people live in that country, and you've only got two parties. You know, you've got the Democrats and the Republicans. Yes, you might have a few independents that will jump in along the way. But when you've got a Republican Party who technically are half of America, and not once, this is where the Europeans get baffled. We all know that Donald Trump, you know, is a walking balloon. You know, he doesn't seem to understand what's happening. But, sorry, Matt, I could see you laughing there. But when you look at the Republican Party and these so-called intellectuals who know how to govern, and they seem to be led and said by Donald Trump. They seem to be afraid. None of them seem to have a backbone whatsoever. Right. And based on all of that, it is very scary for November 3rd of 2020 to see Donald Trump losing at this stage, unless somebody in the Republican Party decides to say, listen, enough is enough. And at the moment, it's not coming across to Europe that there's anybody in the Republican Party, willing to say enough is enough. And based on that, I don't think Joe Biden, because whoever's backing him doesn't seem to be strong enough. Yes, Kamala Harris is I think she should have been it should have been the other way around. She should have been maybe the front runner of the presidency, and Joe Biden could have been the vice president. But I can't see the Democratic Party being, I can't see an ace up their sleeve anywhere. We do have a group of what are called Never Trump Republicans, and most of them are former Republican officials, but they don't seem to have wide outreach. I mean, I think they excite a lot of Democratic liberals, but what do you think, Matt?
They definitely, I mean, those ads are really geared towards, well, if you look at any social media feeds, if you've even looked at anything on the liberal side, you're going to see Lincoln Project stuff. But there's quite a few Republicans that just
don't see it that way.
And that's what baffles me. I mean, if you take a look at globally what's been going on, it's frustrating. It's just really, really frustrating.
Well, why do you think, again, from a European perspective, because Donald Trump is the guy that's up there. Yes, I understand that. He's the guy that was elected to get in there. So he is technically the leader of the Republican Party, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but in order for government to run, you have to have all these people behind the scenes. You have to have, the various governors in the different departments to run the country. So why all of a sudden have all of these people decided to go against the grain of what the political system was to begin with? Because it's coming across to us that, like, the leader of the House,
Nancy Pelosi.
No, sorry, the Republican guy, the fellow who looks like Magoo.
Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, yeah. He does look like Mr. Magoo, doesn't he? Remember Mr. Magoo? He's coming on, and we heard recently one of our reporters from our national TV, who's based in Washington, when that judge passed away, Ginsburg.
Yes.
When she passed away, he came on and said that already Trump had something like 3 to 5 nominees that he felt he was going to put forward, and Mitch McConnell came out to say that yes, one of them will be voted in prior to the election.
Right.
That it's urgently needed, that we need to fill that spot as soon as we can. But still, he's refusing, from what I believe, to pass a few other bills that are more essential to the running of the country. And he thinks that there's plenty of time to pass them because they've been nominated by the Democratic Party. And this to me seems to come across as it's just to say, oh, you're a Democrat, no matter what you suggest or what you decide to do, no matter how good it is for the country, because you're Democrat, we'll go against it. We don't like you.
Well, and the thing is, for all of Donald Trump's bluster about him being against the entire establishment, Democrats and Republicans, whatever policy we can pull from his administration does fall in line with what McConnell wants. Whether we're talking about the tax cuts or getting rid of environmental regulations or appointing people to the Supreme Court who will overturn abortion and other rights. So I think they tolerate all of his eccentricities because they have been able to get a lot of their policy positions met. And it's really horrifying to watch, right? Because, if I were one of those senators, I don't know how I would look myself in the mirror, but I think they say to themselves, hey, we're getting through policies that we're able to get it through. And if this guy is gruff and obnoxious and maybe even a white nationalist, they're willing to pay that price to get big tax cuts, environmental regulations, and the Supreme Court they want. It's like, what do they call that? Like a Faustian bargain or something like that?
Yeah. I'm so disappointed because back when Merrick Garland should have been confirmed when Scalia passed away, that was far more time than what we have right now. And everybody's like, oh, no, you can't. Well, now we're, 60 days from an election. And it's like, oh, we got to rush this through. And it's the same people that were saying, oh, no, we can't do this. It's like, what's wrong? What's wrong with these folks?
Well, I think the Republicans are better at playing just sheer hardball politics than the Democrats.
Oh, that I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's really what this is all about, right? McConnell, any majority leader of the United States Senate, I'm sure this is true in the Irish Parliament also, the leader of the Parliament and of the Congress, the one thing they're really good at is counting votes. And McConnell was saying to himself, look, if I got 51 votes to do this, we're going to do it. And if that means we have to be called hypocrites and liars, so what?
This is where Mitt Romney really upset me because
they don't care.
I know a couple had said they're not going to, but Mitt Romney's like, oh, I got no problem with it. I'm like, and we had a discussion about, him before. And I'm just like, so where does this come from? But yeah. It's party before country.
And voters tend not to vote out politicians just because they're hypocrites and liars, right?
Yeah.
I think the average voter thinks if I'm going to vote a guy out because he's been a hypocrite, then I'm going to have to vote out every politician because, if you think about it, it's hard to find one politician that has not been a hypocrite or a flat out liar.
Well, that is true. And I think that's true for every country in the world, to be honest.
Yeah.
We have those problems as well with our government. But I think another major problem that you've got over there, now we have it as well, but not to the extent you have, is your media. I know Fox News is a favorite of Trump's, and I know there's one or two other channels that he tunes into, whether it's audio, radio channels or TV channels. But there is a clip that came up on YouTube that I've seen recently, only about 3 or 4 days old, of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I think she has a book out and she was promoting this book and she was on Australian television, ABC. And if anybody wants to see how a journalist should act in the United States, they should look at this woman. She was the anchor woman of a news program, so she wasn't face-to-face with her. Sanders was on video screen, but she asked questions, and you could see Sarah Huckabee Sanders trying to answer the question the way she would have answered it if she was on TV in America.
Exactly.
But this reporter or news anchor, kept going back and really stuck it at her and flustered her. It's the first time I've ever seen her. She was stuttering. You could see her face going red. She basically got caught out by this reporter. So if anybody ever gets the chance, they should go on and check out that news reporter from ABC Australia. It goes on for about 12 to 15 minutes of a pure grilling. And I think that's a big problem that you've got in the United States. I don't think that I've yet to see a very strong news anchor, reporter, or anybody like that can really get at the jugular of the politicians, not just Trump, because he's going to lie no matter what you say, ask him.
Well, the guy from Axios who did that interview, I thought was amazing, because literally all you need to do is ask the follow-up question. Well, I read it in books. Okay, what books? Well, it was magazines. Okay, what magazines? Well, somebody give me the numbers, and then he gets all frustrated. What I'm going to be interested in is for the debate coming up in 5 or 6 days. Chris Wallace is going to be the interviewer there, and I'm really looking forward to that, because I understand he's Fox, but I think he's like one of the normal ones on Fox. Mm-hmm. Because I think I do believe that you're going to see a lot of frustration on both sides in this first debate. The one I'm really looking forward to, even more so than that, is the one on October 7th with Pence and Harris. I think that'll be an interesting one.
Now, Matt, I think we should close this show today with a bonus. We're going to reveal who actually killed John F. Kennedy. It turns out that Robert Farmer, he enjoys a good conspiracy theory, and John F. Kennedy was an Irish-American president, and I believe he was highly admired over there, was he not?
Very much so, yeah. He was actually in Ireland the year that he was assassinated. He was here in the month of July for a period of, I think it was a week and a half. Yeah. And he was, at the time, I think there was only one or two since President Kennedy that actually spoke in the Irish Parliament, that he went on and he gave a speech. But everybody loved him. You can see a lot of the old archive footage clippings of him if you ever go on YouTube and check that out, of him doing his parade down various streets in various towns around Ireland. And the crowds were enormous back then.
Right.
So
now,
he was loved.
After the president was assassinated, Lyndon Johnson, his successor, put together the Warren Commission, and the Warren Commission concluded that John F. Kennedy was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. It was just one gunman. Correct. You don't believe it was Lee Harvey Oswald? No,
I don't. I believe he was a patsy or a scapegoat. Again, this is just my opinion. I don't have any affiliation with anybody regarding my views on this. But I believe that Kennedy, in whatever dealing he was doing before his assassination, and which led up to his assassination, had something to do with the restructuring of domestic politics that got up the nose of one or two people within his own government. And I think that led ultimately to his assassination. If I had to put money on it, and I know it'll never come out, but I would say that Lyndon B. Johnson himself was a part of it. Because if you look at the Warren Commission, for anybody, especially in this day and age when it comes to science, we were speaking about science in the outset regarding the pandemic, but how could one bullet do what it said and move in left and right, unless you're from one of these Marvel movies, to go into a back of a head, to come down out in through a wrist, and then go through a seat in front and hit the passenger on the left-hand side at a totally different angle, and still remain pretty intact when it was found. So when you see all of these things and you know that that's scientifically impossible, straight away that raises a red flag. The distance that he was supposedly away, I think they say that he was 6 stories up in the suppository building, and the distance from that to a moving target, this guy must have been absolutely one hell of a sharpshooter if he could have done what they said he did.
But do you think that this was like a broad conspiracy involving everyone from Lyndon Johnson to organized crime and?
Correct. Oh, it was a big thing. Yeah, it wasn't down to one or two individuals. This was down to a lot of people, and again, since Kennedy was assassinated, people disappeared that were in the know, people who came across certain things and saw certain things that they shouldn't have seen. They died suddenly. If you ever look through the full facts of it, there was one particular police officer who was in a car park where he said he saw a man with a gun over a fence, which would have been facing the cavalcade of cars coming towards him. This is behind the famous grassy knoll area.
Right.
But this other police officer who happened to drive in at the wrong time and saw this guy, he suddenly, about, was it 4 or 5 months later, died. And they say he died of respiratory problems. You know, when you hear of these kind of stories, you kind of try to add 2 and 2 together. And in some cases, you'll get 6 and 7 and 8 because, you know, you need all the pieces of the jigsaw to understand it. But it opens up a can of worms. And in this case, questions. You know, I mean, how could, if you look at the slow footage of the actual assassination itself, the way he went back in the seat means that the bullet came from the front. The killing bullet came from the front. It could not have come from behind.
Well, that's where the Warren Commission comes up with that magic bullet theory, right? That the bullet did finally travel, and it came full circle almost. And you and I and Matt, I'm sure. I mean, you were a teacher as well. I mean, we're all knowledgeable enough to know that is scientifically impossible. Do you think there ever will be a smoking gun document found somewhere that will? Because I mean, the thing is, as appealing as I find some of these theories, there really is no way to prove them.
No, I don't think it'll ever come to light that you will find out that, oh, Mr. X is the guy who ordered the killing on Kennedy. I don't think that will ever happen. I do believe that there were a lot of people within the government of the time that were involved. And I do believe that there was members of the so-called mob that were involved. The seedy people that were not part of government, but that were involved in situations that it could seriously damage them if Kennedy went on with his presidency.
So,
well, we'll have to do another show just on
conspiracies.
Our favorite.
Don't get me started on Elvis.
Running on empty, the conspiracy edition. All right, well, Robert, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. This has been great.
You're very welcome. I'm just giving my opinion as a European. You know, I might have other Europeans that will be sitting next to me and they might have a different opinion, but my perspective on that regarding the Trump and the administration and American politics at the moment is what I've just given to you. So, you know, hopefully it's some sort of an insight into a little wee Irishman over here in the Emerald Valley.
Well, we'll definitely have you on after the election, you know, to get your take on the results.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I'd love that.
Excellent.
And if anybody listening and of our listeners want to ask any questions or anything that you want us to bring up to Robert, or you have any comments, questions, suggestions, opinions, etc., please put them down in the comments or anything below, and we will have something fun planned for our next one. So again, Robert, thank you. Tony, thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you indeed.
All right, we'll see everybody next time. Stay elevated.
You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.